I'm joined now with Ezra Bridger. Not quite. We got Captain Kirk is joining me. You just got like all ends of fandom spectrum in your name. You Star Wars and Star Trek right there.
I'm worried you're going to offend people with the Captain Kirk thing already. You know, it's like I don't know. So am I in Star Trek verse or am I in Star Wars? Yeah, it's crazy. So how's it going? Yeah.
Do you have a preference between the two?
Oh, I mean, so. Yeah, I mean, definitely have the whole Star Wars thing. What's funny is that my mother is a Trekkie, a huge Trekkie, and so that was kind of weird. Like I really, when I got into Star Wars, it was kind of funny how that happened because she wasn't as into it, but it was almost like a betrayal to the family.
You've let down your family name. It lives in vain.
Yeah.
Because let's talk about that a little bit. You are. Let's talk about your podcast, the Hyperspace Hangouts. Why don't you talk about a little bit about that and how that came to be?
Yeah, so I started that with my good buddy Matt. I just grew up with him, Matt Brady. I do a couple podcasts with him actually, some Game of Thrones podcast, a gaming podcast, and different things. So we decided to do some Star Wars stuff, and it's like the name kind of says it all. Hyperspace Hangout. It's just we literally just talk about our favorite things in Star Wars. You know, it really doesn't have we're not really diving deep into the books or whatever. Like it could be collecting, it could be video game Star Wars stuff, it could be I don't know, like the TV show and stuff. So yeah, it's Hyperspace Hangout, and what we do is we kind of had people send in transmissions or emails, and we really just either one, read their origin story, or two, we have them send us like theories and stuff, and it's really us kind of commentating less on the news about Star Wars. We have like a quick little segment for the relay station, and we're always behind. We're never caught up on the news because Star Wars is just always constantly moving, and there's so many things happening. But if something big happens, we kind of commentate on it. But really, we like to talk about what got people, why they're still into Star Wars, and just sort of some of their favorite things, like, who's your favorite character, favorite scene, and it's really kind of driven by the transmissions that we get from people. So, yeah, it's a little bit different, and we're still trying to figure it out. I think we're in episode 6 right now, so it's been a little different, but it's got legs, and we're having fun with it, and it's really just a big hangout. So, really chill. So
that's awesome. I can't tell people enough to check you out. I subscribed on the Apple Podcasts myself. I'm a huge subscriber, but obviously it's talking Star Wars. We're going to talk about Star Wars today. I don't know if you're ready for it. This is a hardcore trivia show. I lied to you. It's all going to be Star Wars trivia the whole time.
Oh,
no, we're going to get into. We're going to have some fun here. Before we start, how many Star Wars celebrations have you been to now?
Yeah, so I have been to just the 2. I like to pretend that I was at the one in Europe because I followed it so closely when they first did the live stream. So that was when Alden Ehrenreich came out for the whole Solo thing, and they were over in London, I think, and kind of following that. So that's when we, on our YouTube channel, we really got into it. And then in my younger years, we just kind of followed it from afar, articles, and would see pictures, and was so jealous. I'm like, how do I get to something like that? How do I go? I just didn't know, and I was still in college and things like that. So, but yeah, I've been to 2. I went to the one down in Orlando a couple years back, and then most recently was out in Chicago and ran across Andrew Fantasia, of all people.
We don't like to talk about him here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Andrew Fantasia.
Gotcha.
Actually, we kind of connected. You and Andrew kind of connected before you got there. However, it seemed like every time one of you turned your head, you ran into each other.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was also just like, we would look over, and there he was with his selfie kind of camera. Yeah. He had his blazer on the one day, and I'm just like,
that's Andrew.
That's who that's awesome. That's why I was like, that's who I want to be. Look at that. He's just going over, getting people's reactions and stories, and it was fantastic. And yeah, we were like, oddly enough, we were like in line next to each other for like several big things, and I'm like, well, hey, I was like, look back there, there's Andrew, and we kind of wade back, and it's always more fun to kind of stand in line for 2 hours with somebody who and you can talk Star Wars with. So But yeah, we ran into him quite a bit, and we were hoping to see you out there too, but we just the stars didn't align or something, you know.
You know what? I did try to go until the Wednesday before. I was actually trying to book it, but with work, it was a new job, and you can't do it all the time. Right. But I will be at Anaheim. That is happening.
Yes.
My tickets are booked. My plane is not booked, but I will be attending Anaheim, so we will have to get together there. And maybe we'll do a Chicago deep dish pizza just for the sake of it in Anaheim, just for old time's sake. What could have been # missed opportunities.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That is great. Yeah.
All right. So Star Wars, you're a big Star Wars fan, 2 celebrations. We're going to get to how you got to those celebrations soon. But first of all, when did you first see Star Wars?
Yeah. So this is such a fun story to tell. And I really like talking about this because I hadn't really, when you're growing up, you don't really think about that question. And then when I got into podcasting and people were kind of asking you and you're thinking back to it, because it was just what I remember most is like reading the books. And as I got older, Phantom Menace came out and all that kind of stuff. But when you really think back, I actually watched I watched Empire Strikes Back, and it was on, someone had recorded it. It was early 90s. I think it was like someone had, I'm not even kidding you, recorded like an episode of like The Incredible Hulk. And then at the end, whatever was left on that VH tape was the first part to Empire. And so I'm like watching The Incredible Hulk, and it's just been recorded off TV or something. And I keep going, and they're on Hoth. You've got Luke out there using the Force, trying to get the lightsaber. And Obi-Wan appears to him, and I'm just blown away. And I'm a youngster, and I remember going to my mom and begging her. I'm like, "Where's the rest of this story? Where, I want to see the rest of the movie. It just finished. It just cut out." And she didn't know for a while what I was talking about. One day, I finally got her to sit down, and I had marked the tape. I had taken the tape to my room, and then I showed it to her, and she knew at the time. I don't know how old I was. I want to say it was early, like elementary school. And yeah, so anyway, she knew it was Star Wars, and she went and got me a copy of all of the movies. And I didn't even know there was a first movie. And so I just wanted to watch the one. I wanted to start the one that I had been watching. So like I would not let my mother put episode 4 in. So I started with episode 5, and then I watched 5. I was like, okay, what's the next one? And then I watched 6, and 6 ended up just being my favorite movie ever. Loved it. And for years, that's what I would watch, was just 5 and 6. I watched 4, but I wasn't really as into it. And then as I got older, I'm like, okay, I got to watch them. I'm going to do a little marathon, and I would have a couple friends over, and we would watch 4, 5, and 6. And then what happened was a little strange. So I loved 6 so much, and we would always go to a place called Boxcar Video. It's a little like, they took an old like train boxcar thing, and they had turned it into this little like movie rental place. And I'd go in there, and I found, I'm just browsing around, and I see Caravan of Courage, and I loved the Ewoks. I was obsessed. My sister would always go in and get like Rainbow Bright or something ridiculous, and so it was like almost every other Saturday it was a thing. We would go in there, she would get her movie, I would get my movie, we both would watch each other's movie, type of thing. And she would mix it up a little bit. I always got Caravan of Courage, always. And I'm kind of like, I'm also that type of guy who like I can play the same song, 20 times in a row, repeat in my car, and I love it, and it doesn't get old. So I'm watching Caravan of Courage just over and over again. Eventually, the guys at Boxcar were kind of like, nobody else rents this, man. Like nobody. And so they told my mom, like, you guys can just they gave it to me. The guy, they were actually kind of also getting ready to kind of close, and we're being run out of town by, bigger, I think it was Blockbuster at the time, and then Family Video and stuff. So they were closing, and I think like I was one of the only people who was like renting that movie, and I think we might have paid like a couple bucks for it, and I took it home and I watched it more than I watched like Return of the Jedi. I don't know what my problem was, but I loved that movie, and I'll never forget that. So I'd be reading, I'd be watching all those movies, and then I would want to know what happened after 6, and that's then how I kind of got into like Star Wars literature and stuff as I got a little bit older. But early on, I remember in elementary school, that was the big deal. Was Caravan of Courage and then Return of the Jedi, back and forth. I would just watch those. So
interesting. I love that you gravitated to Caravan of Courage, because I have my experience. I don't know what my experience is exactly, but I was obsessed with Ewoks, the cartoon, the movies, and I saw. I've said this before. I saw Ewoks on ice. They skidded around.
Yeah.
It was like there was an Ewok obsession that I think people don't quite grasp anymore unless you lived in that time.
Yeah.
I don't think you quite understand what it was. And I don't know. There's been, I mean, maybe it's similar to the Pokemon obsession of the late 90s, early 2000s, but it was something incredible about that. So you were a kid during all of that. Now,
right.
How much time between your Caravan of Courage obsession and the Phantom Menace was there?
Yeah, so let's see. Gosh, how old was I during Phantom Menace? That's the real question. So, because that came out in, 99.
Yeah.
So that was probably early. Oh my gosh, it was probably 93, 94 when all of that was going on. I was really getting into Star Wars. And so, because I remember being able to go to the library and read the Thrawn trilogy, and that was early. That was 92, 93, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Timothy
Yeah,
Zahn's.
it was around there,
Yeah.
So you're getting into Star Wars from my dark time of Star Wars when I was like my first drop off of the galaxy far, far away. You're just getting into it.
Yeah. Which I've heard people talk about that, like coming out of the 80s and then into the 90s, like there was sort of that like drop off. And it was right before when did the special edition come out? Was that 97?
97, yeah.
Or
97.
Yeah, so because I remember getting that and being like, oh my, that's when I really got back into the films and stuff and was watching them again and everything, because that was cool and we were getting hyped for, Star Wars Episode 1 and I just couldn't believe that there were books. I couldn't believe that they were telling the story of Luke Skywalker after Episode 6. And so I remember between early 90s and then between 99, I was reading as much as I could Star Wars books. Now, I wasn't the best reader, and so as much as I could, my mom would get me like some of the the CDs at the time. It was what are the cassette tapes? I don't even remember what they were, but I had an audio edition, and I would listen to those because I was kind of a struggling reader growing up. And it actually I was so fascinated by Star Wars that I would listen to the tape and I would follow along in the book. And so I don't know, but as a kid you do weird things like this. So I remember starting the Thrawn trilogy, and I remember reading the first and second book. I never really got to the end. I never finished the third book. I never actually, got there. And then I remember when other books would come out, I didn't always know whether this was the first book, the second book, or the third book. So it got really jumbled there for a while. My mom was always trying to make sure I had at least the first book, but if it was checked out at the library, then I would just take the second one, and I would just try to figure out the story because I didn't want to wait. And I was like, no, I need it now, and I'm done with this book. I'm returning it. I want a new Star Wars book, so I would take it. So it was a little bit. Once I got past through Phantom Menace and got into some of the, the really got into the prequels, then I started to go back and kind of piece together in my mind the timeline of things and what was happening, and started to understand why there wasn't that we were getting in film the stories before Episode 4, but then what I was reading a lot of was post Episode 6, and so that's where I just kind of felt. And even when I read today, like I love to read about things that happened after Episode 6. I'm not as big into the stuff that happened during the Clone Wars and even some of the Old Republic stuff, although I've read it. But yeah, so about 4 to 5 years there between the Caravan of Courage journey and then Phantom Menace coming out. And I'll tell you, Phantom Menace for me, it was a game changer. I daydreamed like about Padme for years to come. I'm still daydreaming about her, right? So I remember like leaving there and thinking I was, a Jedi and all this kind of stuff, and I was just blown away by the Force powers and lightsaber battle when we got to Phantom Menace. It was fantastic. So I already had all of that kind of going, and here's another layer, I guess, I'll give to you, James. So when I was growing up, I had kind of like a bone disease. So I had these bone spurs, and I was big into sports. My dad played sports, and so I was super into it. But I would go through periods of time where it was like 3 months where it was in the summer, and I couldn't. I was either in a wheelchair or I was on crutches, and I would have surgery on both legs, and they would remove these bone spurs that were just kind of like, it was ridiculous. It's something called like osteochondromatosis, and it's kind of crazy. So even my cousins and uncles and family members have all been kind of like, why are you obsessed with Star Wars? And it's like, I couldn't go outside and play. So I sat inside and I rewatched these movies, and I would listen to the books, and then I would, in my mind, I believed through the Force I can do anything. And so I just loved the idea of thinking about myself as a Jedi with these Force abilities, and it didn't really matter whether I was stuck inside or whatnot. I could really just imagine myself being out there fighting off Sith Lords and everything. So I think that's why I continued, like it never really dropped off for me. It did eventually at the end of high school and into college. I kind of got, that's where we'll talk later about just drifting away from it for a little bit, but yeah, through like middle school and into high school, I was still dealing with all that bone disease stuff, and so I would pick up a book, and that was my escape, if you will.
So Star Wars was like a gateway for you in a lot of ways, from getting kind of away from your reality of not being able to do what you wanted to, and now you get to go ahead and live in this galaxy far, far away. And it's funny, I always talk about what is Star Wars and how we all have these different perception of what Star Wars is, and yours seems to be this world that you created yourself based on the expanded universe at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because when you're dealing with, your friends are out doing their thing, and my cousins are out playing basketball and doing stuff and in the field, and I couldn't go do that. So it, you kind of, what are you going to do? And when you have something like Star Wars at your fingertips, and I was already obsessed with it beforehand, it already felt good. It was really easy just to slip back into and to go to that world and to think about those things, and it helps you get through those times that are a little bit harder. So, and that's sort of where I remember I had a buddy who was also super into Star Wars, and I'm not trying to say that I'm like an expert or anything, but like, when you read the books and you're really into it and you watch the movies hundreds of times, you know what you're talking about. So like I would talk to some of those guys, and I kind of hid my that side of me for a little while, because they would want to talk about Star Wars, and then I would just be dropping some of this knowledge, and they'd be like, "What?" I was almost too nerdy. Does that make sense? Yep. Like I was kind of like, so I had that going for me. I had a close cousin growing up who I didn't really care whether he and I would read the same books and play the same video games, and we could really talk openly and freely about all of this. And then as you get older, you realize it's cool to be a nerd, and it doesn't really matter. But in middle school and high school, I had to be careful about how much I dropped on everybody, when it came to Star Wars. But yeah, so
definitely. Now, so the special editions come out. You're deep into the lore of Star Wars. Were you excited about the special editions because you were still fairly young, and did you go see them in the theater?
No, I did not get to go see them in the theater, and I was not upset because I didn't know any better, really. And so that's the God's honest truth. So once I got the special, that was my new watch. The old VHS tapes are in the back closet, stored away, because I've got the new. Had the gold edition. Didn't have the widescreen, but that's okay. So yeah, and I loved it, and I just sort of I noticed differences, and then when I would hear other friends talk about it, and when I would read just about Star Wars and stuff and the changes that were made, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But I really didn't care as much, because I was just more into the story. The story is the same. It's a better, cleaner edition, and I say better, gotta be careful.
Point of view. It's better from a certain point of view.
Yeah, from a certain point of view, yeah. So yeah, it didn't bother me as much, and that ended up being my go-to. That was the box set that I watched from then clear until DVDs came around and stuff. So yeah, it didn't upset me, and it got me prepped and ready to go for for the Phantom Menace, and it kept me going through all that. So yeah, I don't know. I now I like to look back and look at the differences, and I like to go back and see the changes that were made, and I better understand what George Lucas was trying to do, and I love that he's actually, in some ways, listening to him talk at Celebration and then listening to David Filoni talk about how he was always trying to improve and get better, and just he kept telling Dave to not be afraid, just to push the envelope a little bit, and it's like he felt like he needed to go back and tweak and change some of that stuff, and so I just like to kind of hear from him why he did those things or what he wanted to get out of it, and so I think it's neat, but yeah, and there were so many different like little things that he was changing throughout those years. My buddy Matt recently brought up the laser disc, the laser discs. Yeah, and I'm like, what was that? I mean, I was lucky enough to have a VHS, and so he was kind of telling me about it and how just looking at like highest quality that you could watch it on, but yet was kind of in between. That was still the old. That was before special edition and stuff, right? I don't really know.
Yeah, that was very early on. I never had one because I don't know anybody that had a Laserdisc player. But they were the size of records. And right. Apparently it was like the best quality. They were better than DVD quality, I believe, and they were just phenomenal. But I don't think I've ever actually even seen one played in front of me. I've seen the discs and I've seen the players, but I've never seen one displayed on a TV before.
Right. Yeah, we were looking some up on eBay and trying to find a couple because we went down this rabbit hole of he was obsessed with that and trying to watch it in the highest quality, but then also the closest you could get to the original before all the special cuts and everything. And I was just like, wow, all right. So we might try to pull that off one day, but it's just archaic, So
yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah,
So with the Phantom Menace coming, it obviously was a prequel to everything, and you were deeply into the EU, which was after after the Return of the Jedi, episode 6, as you said.
Yeah.
How excited were you for the Phantom Menace, knowing that it was going to be in a different era of Star Wars? And did you watch the trailer early, or did you kind of just like the special editions in the theater? Did you just kind of wait to see that organically?
Yeah, I remember seeing the promos for it, really more like the merch, like the cups at Burger King and things like that were happening, and that's really, I knew there were posters out and Star Wars was coming back, and friends at school were talking about it more so I really didn't see like a trailer or anything beforehand, and I just went in and watched it with it's funny because like it's with my grandma, my mom, we forced them to go, and a couple of my cousins, we all got together and we went and watched Phantom Menace, and our minds were just blown. I remember like hearing my grandma talk about that for years to come, just how crazy excited we were, and like they had no flipping clue what was going on, but we were talking about it, trying to make connections, and so to them it was really cool to kind of hear my grandma's perspective on like what it was like to be around all these kids who were just super into this, and they took us out to eat, and we just kept talking about it, and then for days to come, the obsession just grew from there. It was, I mean, I'm already obsessed with it, right? And then you have, it's all to see the Jedi do the things that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon were doing, and then to have Darth Maul for a youngster, because I was probably, 9, 10, 11, 12, 11 or 12, I think, when that came out. Phantom Menace, I think, somewhere around there. And anyways, it was just, I was losing my mind. And then because after that, I remember reading the Jedi Apprentice series. So, the Obi-Wan, it was like a young reader thing. It was like 19 little like junior novels. And it was Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, how they kind of, came together as master and apprentice. Their whole journey, Qui-Gon's former apprentice who turned to the dark side, and they all had to fight and everything. So, yeah, I became obsessed with that in between Phantom Menace and then going into Attack of the Clones. So, yeah, that was a good time. I remember just going on vacations, like reading those books and begging my mom to like buy another book, and yeah, but. I bring those books up far too often. I don't know why. I always bring up the Jedi Apprentice books, and there were actually more that I never read, which were the after Attack of the Clones, you had the Jedi Quest books, the junior novels. So I'm a reading teacher, and so I teach kids who are kind of struggling readers, and I wasn't really sure. I have some boys who really like Star Wars, and they're really into like Rebels and the Clone Wars and all that kind of stuff. And I brought in my old books, and we started reading from the beginning about Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and how they got together. They still land. They love them. I mean, those are out of, you can't find those anymore. And so I brought the Jedi Apprentice books in, and the kids just love them. It's just kind of taken off, and it's a thing. They actually, going into this year, we still have to get through like 5 or 6 more of them this coming year, because they were freshmen last year and then sophomores this year. And it's funny because they're in high school, but they're readers that are at their level, and they just love the story. So they're good little books. A little plug for anybody who's wanting to get somebody into reading, if you're a junior reader or what have you.
Hey, timeless stories are timeless for a reason, right? It doesn't matter how long they've been around or how old the reader is, you will enjoy them regardless. And that's That's awesome. It's awesome that it enhances their reading, that it wants them to get into reading. Because I think reading, and this is side Akbar, I guess, but it's being lost on people, right? Nobody reads anymore. Everything is online or audio books and whatnot, and it's sometimes I can't do audiobooks personally. I just cannot go at their pace. It's not my thing. I have to do my own. Did you get the novelization for The Phantom Menace?
Yes, but for some reason it just, and I remember reading some of that, but I like, it's one of those things, like I had it just to have it, and it's on the shelf, and that's really, because I kind of already knew that story, and so I didn't get into what the novelizations could bring. And honestly, until The Force Awakens came out, like I wasn't reading any of I would read all the other books, but if it was about if it was like the novelization version, I didn't read those. I bought them, and so it's kind of a weird thing. I don't know why I didn't, but I was like, I know the story. I watched the movie 100 times, but I didn't realize until later that there's all these extra little nuggets in there, and it's like, what was I doing? What was I thinking?
I think you just wanted to have it because it was part of that experience that you had. Speaking of that experience that you had, you said that really, instead of the trailers and TV spots and all that, for you it was the merchandise. It was the Burger King or nachos, Doritos, whatever it was. Did you try to I guess that age you wouldn't necessarily be collecting, but did you try to get your hands on those pieces of merchandise?
Yeah, and like now that I'm older, I've gone back and things that like I remember when I went from high school to college, a lot of my Star Wars stuff, like stuff that I had kind of boxed away that was super, like, no one's ever going to throw this away or whatever, that stayed. But I found out, like, some of my cousins took some of my toys, some of my old, like, I have some missing things. And I came back, and I never wanted to make anybody feel bad. So, but I'm, like, heartbroken because I'm like, where is that? I'm actually still missing my episode 5 out of my VHS gold pack. And I'm like, where is that? I know that I loaned it to a cousin, and it's one of those things that, so I came back from college a few times, like, where's all my stuff? But yeah, because I would keep, like I had an old Burger King cup, I think. I had a couple little promotional things from The Phantom Menace that were just coming out in, like, restaurants and stores or wherever. And I had, like, a stack or a pile of that, and some of it looked like junk, I think, to my mom. And some of it got thrown out. I'm just like, God dang it. So now when I see it at Celebration, when they've got those, little knickknacks and stuff, I'm like, yep, grabbing that, because I literally can see it, and it takes me right back to a memory I have of driving, going through the drive-thru or being with my mom or grandma and like picking that up or whatever. So, and also the toy wise. So I'm trying to think what line that was in the early 90s. What were the toys that were coming out? The Luke and the Han and the Leia. It was something Force.
Oh, the Force Link. Was the Force Link?
Was that what it was? Maybe. So, anyways, I was really into I wanted Star Wars toys. That's all I wanted. I every Christmas, every birthday, and my birthday happens to be right next to Christmas, so I was just like,
Power of the Force. Power of the Force.
Power of the Force. That's what it was. Power of the Force. Yes. So I had a lot of those. And I had cousins who were older than me who had some of, like, the original Kenner, toys and stuff. And I never quite understood at the time, like, why those were still in the box, why the heck some of them were played with, some of them were loose. And I was allowed to play with some of those things, and I even have a couple of them that were given to me by a couple older cousins. And then now that I'm older, I'm like, I want all of that. I want all of those, original toys plus Power of the Force stuff. I still actually have most of my Power of the Force, toys that in a box in my storage unit somewhere that were just super cool. Some were still in packages, which is kind of cool.
That's awesome.
And then some were a lot of them were kind of loose and stuff. And then some got sold in the yard sale. And I'm just like, how? Where was I not? Why was I not monitoring all my Star Wars, memorabilia and stuff? So I guess I'm out trying to get a college degree and then come back and people didn't realize how important it was to me. So
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have that experience too, where they had the Star Wars stuff and then one day it just was gone. And the thing is, look, it was a different era too, right? Nobody knew that these were going to come back in style at any point because it was all new, right? Like, it had never been done before. Yeah. This wasn't, people collected comics, but they didn't really collect comics. They just kind of all of a sudden were like, the comic's worth $1 million. And we were like, oh, I need to start collecting. And now everything is oversaturated, and it's a unique period of time.
Right. And, you brought up comic books. I think some people would wonder if I had read any of the comic books, and I actually was not a comic book person. I don't know why. I think my mom was always trying to push me to be a better reader and stuff, so, those can be a good tool or whatever, but I never got into the comic books. And now that I'm older, I've gone back and have been looking at trying to get some of the older comics, and then even some of the old Marvel stuff, and then it went to Dark Horse, right? It some of the comic books, they had like a time and period where I think Dark Horse was running a bunch of Star Wars comics, and those are really cool. I like kind of finding those, but it's hard to be a Star Wars collector. You got to really dedicate to this, and I've realized I've skirted close to being obsessed. I mean, my collection now is just Star Wars books, like the actual just the novels. So I'm collecting those, and I started with the toy stuff, and I'm like, there's just too much. There's just too much, and cardboard is way too expensive. So I'm gonna kind of steer clear from that for a little while. And I get the ones that I like, the ones that are really cool to me. Like I went down. We have a store in Columbus, Ohio. I think it's called Big Fun, and this guy is like known for his Star Wars collection, and there's just a crap ton of Star Wars toys in there. So I went down, I said, I need all the original Ewok toys, all of them. And he signed me up on this list, and he was like, all right, well, we're missing one or two. He gave me what he had. I bought those, and then he's been calling me as they come in and stuff. So that's been kind of cool. And this is going to sound even weirder, but for my niece Rachel and stuff, I wanted to go I saw these the Ewok plush toys, and I was obsessed with those. I had one. My sister had one. I don't know. We had when I was really young, had one for some freaking reason. But they're awesome. And I'm like, why? So I saw a guy at Celebration down in Orlando who had a whole booth dedicated to literally that's all he sold was Ewok stuff. And it was just all these Ewok plush toys. Yeah, it was amazing. I was like, it was only Bright Tree stuff, and I'm just like, this guy's amazing. So I wanted to be that guy. So
well, the future's still bright. You got plenty of time to become that guy. Let's move on now to Attack of the Clones, because you saw, the thing that really for me is when I saw The Phantom Menace, I was, I think, in my last year of high school. And then by the time Attack of the Clones came, I was in college. So you're younger than that. So how did that experience go from Phantom Menace to Attack of the Clones? How did you stay? Were you interested in Attack of the Clones after that 3-year gap still? And how did you maintain that? Was it still, I don't even know what books were coming out at that point, but did you stick with those?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I kind of... This is where it starts to get kind of scattered. You remember I said that when you would go to the library and you would pick up a book and you would kind of start to read it. I didn't really know where it fell in the series. All of that Clone War, Shatterpoint, Rogue Planet, those were a couple books that I had read, and I didn't know anything about the connection between Rogue Planet and all of the stuff with later on, the Yuuzhan Vong and all that kind of craziness. I wasn't making any of those connections yet. I was just kind of reading the stories to read them, and so I read a few of those, but it was so scattered, and I just didn't have time because I was this 2002. So where was I? I was about to go into high school. I think I was a freshman. Yeah, so I'm super into playing sports and stuff like that, and trying to be somewhat normal, even though I was still in the orchestra. I'd play linebacker in football, and then I would go pick up my viola and play in a quartet.
Oh, you're football musician and then Star Wars nerd. Like what a trifecta that is.
It's so weird, and people are like, you're just a weird dude. And I'm like, yeah, it is what it is.
Figure yourself out.
But yeah, exactly. Where do you want to?
No, I think that's actually awesome that you had all those different aspects rolled into one.
It's just a little weird. So I kept it going just by reading a couple of those books, and I would see them come out at the library or at the store. And a few of them I bought because I'm getting a little bit older, and I had especially after Attack of the Clones came out. I'm getting a job working at Hardee's, working at Long John Silver's, and so I had my own money, and I was buying my own Star Wars books at that time. But I think that's something people kind of forget is that, like, growing up, I mean, if you didn't have the money to go buy this stuff, I mean, unless you had parents who were going to just buy everything for you. Like now, a new book comes out for Star Wars. I have it the first day. The next day I'm reading it. Boom, we're talking about it and whatever. And even before I started podcasting, as you get older, like, yeah, I'm going to go grab that book, and I'm not going to tell anybody that I have a secret stash and collection that I'm working on as an adult. But so yeah, I don't know. I remember still going with kind of my cousins that my one cousin Luke, who I was really close with, and we would always talk Star Wars, and then a few of my buddies I kind of let in on the whole, the guys, the two buddies who went with me to Phantom Menace, we went again to Attack of the Clones, and yeah, I don't know, I don't really have that was a busy time, moving from middle school into high school, and it was epic. I really enjoyed it, and I remember as much as I could, I would still read some of those novels, but then I started working and stuff after that, and so it got a little bit tougher to kind of keep up with some of the reading and everything. But yeah, still was obsessed. I remember though not being like now we talk about Attack of the Clones, we're like, where does it rank? Is it a good movie? At the time, that's what we had, and I loved it. I was sort of like, this is cool. This is really cool. There were some corny lines, and I knew even sort of like the romancy stuff was a little bit too much. But what made up for it was Yoda versus Count Dooku. I'm like, this is amazing. This is cool. And then having to go and figure out who Count Dooku was, those little mysteries were kind of cool. Later on we'll talk about General Grievous and when he's developed. And so after Attack of the Clones, when was the animated? Wasn't there an animated?
Yeah, I think it was
movie
the year after. I think no, it was an animated movie. It was a little show, just called. I think that was just called Clone Wars. That was the Clone Wars. I can't remember.
Yeah,
I never remember which one's called the Clone Wars. Is the Clone Wars the Filoni one, or is he just Clone Wars? I think he's just Clone Wars.
Okay, here, I got it right here. So Star Wars Clone Wars is the 2003 TV series.
Yeah.
And then Star Wars The Clone Wars is the 2008 TV series. Yeah. So yeah, the 2003 one I definitely didn't. I would see it here and there, and I never followed it, really. Didn't quite understand it. So I was still just into reading the books, and I don't know why. I thought those were more fun, and I didn't really watch a lot of TV, so that was part of it. Like, we would either be on a vacation or a trip, and that's when I would pick up a book and just kind of read or whatever. And so, and in school you always have like, we had something called like accelerated reader, where you had to like score points by reading books on your own. And so I'm like, well, I'm reading all these Star Wars books to get my points and taking the quiz. And so, but yeah, so that happened afterwards. And I remember my younger cousins were more obsessed with that and really would talk about watching that. Was it 3 seasons on Cartoon Network? It's saying it's 25. I
think it was 2 seasons.
Episodes.
2 seasons.
Was it 2?
It was
okay.
2, yeah, Volume 1 and Volume 2.
Okay,
they're impossible to find on DVD now, unless you get the PAL version from France. For Volume 2, I have Volume 1, but not Volume 2. That's how life goes. Okay. I was, I don't think it was very easy to find in Canada to watch that. It might have been, and I might just not have known about it. But I just bought the DVD for Volume 1 right away. I was like, I got to have this in my life. But just like you, I found I was more into reading the stuff than watching that show for whatever reason. I don't know what it was necessarily. But did you get any of the any collectibles from McDonald's or Burger King or any of the action figures for Attack of the Clones?
No, I really didn't. That was a time where I'm not saying I was just super busy and I wasn't yeah, I would just grab. I honestly just remember grabbing a couple of the novels afterwards and stuff, and that was really it. I did not get any more toys, and I like even when we were just talking about the TV show there, I kind of thought that was cartoony, and I'm trying to be cooler, and so I just kind of took it surface level. But yeah, I don't really remember having a whole lot like Phantom Menace. Like we said, I had a bunch of stuff from that, but nah, after Attack of the Clones, no, not really. It wasn't until like Revenge it will pick back up. That's when I really go a little crazy. So right before I go off to college, one last hurrah and let the cat out of the bag, let the mind knock out, and let everybody know that I'm a huge Star Wars nerd right before I graduate.
Right before. So let's get right to this. So you're about to graduate.
Yeah.
But just before that, Attack of the Clones is coming in. You go through your high school year. You're reading the books. You're playing sports. You're in bands. You're loving Star Wars. You're probably a big poker player. Probably were amazing at crabs. You just did everything. It didn't matter what it was. You had no genre. You were not going to be pigeonholed to anything.
That's right. Yeah.
Was it just?
Yeah. So
were you still obsessed with Star Wars heading into Sith?
Yeah, and actually, so I think that was my junior year going into senior. I think maybe it was just senior year, and that's when I kind of let the cat out of the bag. I started to, my senior year, I had like another knee situation with my whole bone disease and stuff. It was one of the last surgeries that I had, and because it was kind of a bone disease where like as I'm growing and my growth plates are still kind of closing up and stuff, like that's when it was a big issue. Now it's not as much. It's more of an adolescent type of thing, and so I ended up not being able to play my senior year of football, and it was ridiculous. It was kind of like I knew going into my junior year into senior year that it wasn't going to happen, and so I started something called chess club. I just started this chess club, and I got it approved. And it really was kind of a front for just a games club, a nerdy club. We played. I played chess because I knew how to play, and my buddy Tom knew how to play, and so we would play. Everybody else just kind of came and cracked open some dews and got some donuts, and we watched movies and hung out, and we just kind of took over the high school there. We had a small little high school, and but then I remember going into my senior year, and the chess club just kind of like took off. We're the upperclassmen, and I'm just sort of like, you know what? Nobody can tell me what to do. I'm the coolest kid in the school. I mean, not really, but you know what I'm saying? Like I'm big dog now. Yeah. So who's gonna make fun of me? A bunch of these underclassmen. So that's when you start to kind of say, I'm just gonna be who I am. And like this is no joke. My buddy Mike from Rebel Watch, actually, we were in orchestra together. And we used to kind of hide our instruments. So we would have to bring them into school, and we would hide them in our lockers. And like last period of the day, we'd be going to like orchestra, and we would tell everybody that, we're just kind of like, hey, where are you guys going? Like, we're going to study hall, man. Don't worry about it. Like, we'll see you later. We're always tardy because we didn't want to be watching, having kids watch us walk in the hallways with our instruments. But then senior year, we just kind of like didn't give a crap. We were just sort of like, all right, we're just going to let this out and just be who we are. And people loved it. So we had like chess club. And so the setup here is that we had something called Form Show. It's kind of like we had like a form court where some talent show, if you will. And every year the seniors would do some type of skit. And our senior class like wasn't going to do one. We just were kind of lame. And I was like, we're not going to be lame. We're not going to be the senior class that doesn't do a skit. So I got a bunch of my friends together, and we did this huge rap battle. We did this huge, what was that called? We got Death Star, the whole Star Wars rap battle back. Let me see here. Let's see. Yeah, it was like, Luke's talking. He's like, Yoda, why you being a player hater? All this kind of stuff. Do you remember that? I don't know if you remember that. That was.
I don't remember that. Maybe if I heard it, but no, I don't remember.
I think it's called Star Wars Gangster Rap. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And it was something that we just kind of found on, was it YouTube or something? I don't know where. Somebody brought this to my attention. They're like, because they knew that I like Star Wars. Like, have you seen this? And I'm like, no, what the heck is this? And then I saw it, and I thought I wanted to have a big lightsaber, like choreograph like a lightsaber fight, and go in and just go nuts. But we thought on the front end of this, what we'll do is we'll do the battle to. I had a buddy who could mix some music, and he mixed in a really nice Duel of Fates in between. Like, we stop the rap, and then we break out into Duel of Fates, and we had this big battle. Yeah, and so I remember all of that being like hyped around Revenge and going to see that movie with like all of my high school buddies. And when we were doing the form court, actually, no joke, James, if I can find it, I will find a link on YouTube. We have actually recorded this, and it's on this big stage. I think we had something like 30 people involved. All of us have lightsabers, and it's this 30-person, 30 students. We had some members out in the audience, like staged out there. They're sitting there acting like they're just watching the play, and then when the music hits for Duel of the Fates, like they stand up and we all start fighting. It's freaking nuts. It's insane. One of the best things I ever did, and from there, Star Wars was kind of cool, right? I mean, people were like, Revenge was coming out, and I'm a senior, so I don't really care what anybody thinks, and it just kind of felt good to get that out. So we choreographed that. We had Mike was my buddy Mike was Luke Skywalker. You know, he was in a rap battle with Darth Vader, and then my buddy Matt and I was Obi-Wan, he was Qui-Gon Jinn, and we fought my buddy Tom, who was Darth Maul, right up there on the main stage, and it was like the big choreographed fight. Awesome. It was so ridiculous. It was ridiculous, but that all was, I don't remember exactly what it was before or after Revenge, you know, because I graduated in 2006. So let me help me recall here a little bit. So Revenge,
2005, I want to say.
Was it? Yeah. So yeah, 2005. So okay. So we had gone and seen that, and then going into senior year, we were still hyped about it. And I remember I had a friend of mine, Tiffany at the time, Marcel from Swish and Flick podcast, a Harry Potter podcast. She had never seen a lot of my buddies, like Mike, who I hosted Rebel Watch with. They hadn't seen Star Wars really, and so I remember before we did that skit, you know, Revenge came out, and I'm pretty sure he was one of the people who came to Revenge of the Sith and hadn't seen Star Wars. You know what I mean? It was one of those things where I had buddies who came and watched Episode 3, and they didn't know what Star Wars was really, and during that senior skit, we did like a marathon. So we were after school as a part of the air quote chess club. We'd be in there. We'd have the chess boards out, but we were just watching Star Wars and or something else nerdy. Somebody would throw in a cartoon, something funny like He-Man or something stupid, you know. And yeah, so we did a marathon. I got everybody kind of prepped and all caught up in Star Wars. And I just remember the obsession among my friends kind of took off. Like they were, like I have a lot of friends now who like tell me to this day that like they got into Star Wars because senior year I was doing movie marathons. We did like a huge weekend marathon thing. We started it at school. We finished it over the weekend, and then we decided to do the senior skit that the rest of the senior class wasn't willing to do. And then we, you know, I don't know. So that was Revenge. That's where that was sort of my. And it's weird because that's sort of my last hurrah. Then I go to college, and not much is going on, right? Because, you know, Star Wars is really, there's books being made and stuff, being written and some games and stuff, but there's not, like, there is no Episode 7. George kept saying, like, it's not going to happen. Yep. And I kept telling folks, it's going to happen. I swear to God, I have witnesses, James, that I kept saying for years, like, no, just give it time. There's no way. They're definitely going to make this story. And I really didn't believe myself when I said it. But yeah, I was super pumped. That's like my last hurrah. Then I go to college. I go down to Ohio State and you know, kind of drifted away from Star Wars, honestly.
Yeah, well, the Revenge of the Sith was touted as the final episode. We weren't going to get any more Star Wars, obviously. However, there was a lot of time. I mean, obviously, the Clone Wars happened on Cartoon Network with Dave Filoni coming on board. And then there's also talk of the live-action show Star Wars Underworld, where Rick McCallum's like, we're going to do it. We have all the scripts. It's going to happen. Yeah. Did you follow any of that before going dark?
So the only thing that I knew about, it was sort of from my younger cousins who were still, you know, I was just really busy with college and stuff, and they would keep me up to date on, like, the Clone Wars and would talk about that when he was coming on board. And then, what was it, 2008 or something, 7 or 8, when that was really getting ramped up. And so I graduated in college, I think 2009 or 2010. And so yeah, I was out of it and really didn't quite know what was going on in with all of that. I would see an episode here or there, and I kind of thought, that's a cartoon. You know, I really thought that, and I was like, I don't know, not for me. I'm sure it's just something for kids, and there's really nothing there story wise. Boy, was I wrong. I was so wrong, and I'm glad that I was. You know, like going back now and watching it, it's amazing. I didn't really. I remember watching like season, right when I got out of college, and I was kind of doing my thing, and I'm back. I moved in with Mike and got a teaching job and everything. We moved down to Columbus, and I remember like us pulling up Star Wars and pulling up just sort of reading up on things that were happening at celebrations, for example, and realizing that there are panels out there that you can go to and all this stuff. And I'm like, what is this? I want to go to one of those things someday. And then trying to get caught up on the Clone Wars. And so it was really a catch-up period for me. I was just trying to go back and piece by piece figure out how to be an adult, how to actually, teach and show up to work on time and all that kid stuff, and then in my spare time try to go back and catch up on the Clone Wars and some of the novels that I missed. So that was what that was like for a while. And it was that way for a while until Disney. So
do you know where you were and what your reaction was when Disney made that huge purchase?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Where was I? I remember I remember calling my buddy Tom. I don't remember exactly where. I know that I was I think I was home. I was back visiting my mom and dad, and I remember calling my buddies in Mount Vernon because that's where I'm from. And even though I'm still working in Columbus, I'm back. That happens. I remember calling them and saying like it's almost like I didn't say I told you so, but I was kind of saying like, guys, like, and I just remember being totally stoked by it. I called my buddy Tom, who was super into it. I eventually called Mike. I called Matt, and we all kind of talked about it and just were super stoked. And we were, the questions start to be asked like, well, what's it going to be? Like, who's running it? I mean, are they going to continue? The big question was right when it's announced, like, are they going to continue on? Is this going to be episode 7? I mean, that's what I was just like, it has to be. It has to be episode 7. They're going to continue on with the story. And then I started doing all the research where, George had said to the original cast back in the day, hey, what do you think? 30 years from now, you want to come back and maybe we'll do the sequels. It's just like what? All that stuff is there, back when they were shooting the originals and stuff. And it's just like, it was so cool. So, yeah, that's really Disney's purchase is what got me back into it. We were still playing Battlefront 2. We were still playing some of the games, and we were playing Empire at War. And I remember playing more video games like in college and then after college, leading up to when Disney was making its purchase. There was a game that was being developed, a huge game that was being developed by Lucasfilm. Do you remember what that was called? What was that? It was like something
1313.
1313. Yeah. That's right. Yes. And it was never it looked really cool, didn't it? It was this action adventure video game. Yeah. And it was canceled. So that was because of the takeover, right? So because we were getting hyped for that, and I remember my buddy Matt, who's really into video games, was talking to us about it, and we were getting ready, and I was like, all right, cool, this is gonna be awesome. And then boom, out of nowhere, it's like Disney's taking over. And it didn't even really hurt my feelings that when later on after Disney takes over and you realize, okay, here's what's canon, here's what's not canon, all that kind of stuff, didn't really hurt my feelings because I'm like, there's more Star Wars at a much higher, like, we're going to be getting a lot of crap. Like, it wasn't just this trickling of like a book here or a comic book series there, a video game, where Star Wars kind of felt like, not dead, but I mean, it was over. As you said, Revenge of the Sith, that was it. And so then, I was just hyped because we were going to get more movies, so.
I'm glad you brought that up about the books because George Lucas never really considered them canon anyway. And the thing is they could say these are not canon, and that doesn't stop the books from being the books. They still exist. Yeah. You could still go to the library, go to the bookstore, go to your Kindle, Kobo, whatever site and purchase them. They're all there. You can read them, and I don't think they're diminished at all by not tying into the films. I think the new Disney books are the value to them is greater because they're connected to the movies. However, I don't feel like all of the books have been that great on that side. So, I mean, sometimes if I want to read a good Star Wars book, it might not tie into a movie, but I'm okay with that because it's a story is a story, and it doesn't need to always connect.
Right. So I got a question for you because at one point, and as I got older and I was kind of thinking about this, if George were to have gone and done episode 7, 8 and 9, he would have wiped the slate clean anyways, right? I mean, he would have said like those stories they're fun, but they're just.
Well, he did that with the prequels anyway. He didn't care. Exactly. He was going to tell his own story. He didn't care.
Yeah. Right. And I remember there was a funny little what is it called? It's called it's a fan film, Dark Redemption. It's something Mara Jade related. And I remember it was like going into one of the celebrations that fan film competition, and George or someone at Lucasfilm disqualified the film because it took place right before episode 4. He's like, no. He's like, that's the canvas I'm working with, and I told everyone that no, that is not going to work because this is a time period where you can't touch it. I'm working on the prequels. And so it's like, okay, if he shifts to the sequels and starts working there, yeah, all that mm-hmm. The Great War, the Second Civil War, all that stuff that happens in Legends is, I mean, it's just not going to be there because he's going to write his own story. And I think it's where people get confused sometimes. It's like they're great stories, and it's really cool that Del Rey did that, and they had a bunch of authors working together, and they kind of had like a pre-story group type of thing, and we're working on these arcs and stuff, and it was connected in some ways. There were some continuity issues and stuff, but for the most part, it's really well connected, and it's cool. It's this other universe. But like you said, you can still just go pick that up and read it. To this day, I was just out mowing a couple of days ago, and I was back in the Thrawn trilogy. Had started it over, and I was reading it again because I got to get to the third book and actually finally finish the Dagon thing. So yeah, and they're still fun. And what's cool is where I really thought Disney did a great job. So Rebels, when they brought in Thrawn, and they took a character who was already there, who had been developed in the EU, and Timothy Zahn is just well respected. Everybody loves his work. They said, yeah, we're bringing that character in, but we're going to write our own sort of backstory to this, and we're going to redo it, make it fit in with everything else that we're doing. And that's where I think people should be kind of celebrating Disney and saying, that's kind of cool. They're taking something that we loved, a character who we thought was really cool, and they're bringing. I mean, have you read the new Thrawn trilogy that Timothy Zahn has been?
I've only read the first one.
Right. Okay. So in reading the first one though, did you not feel like at some point you were like rooting for Thrawn, and you're like, this guy's awesome?
100%.
Yeah. And it's like, wait a second. I'm rooting for the guy who was like, after Luke and Leia and her twins, and Master Sabaoth and all this crap that was happening in the EU, but they made me like care about this character. Yeah. I want to know what happens to Thrawn, and Rebels did such a good job with all of that, all the way through to the season finale or the series finale. So
absolutely,
yeah, man. I don't know. I'm glad that it happened. And my first celebration I went to in Orlando, I had read about some of this stuff, the petitions going around to like make separate timelines and all this crazy stuff. I'm like, I can make a separate timeline or an alternative universe or whatever they were trying to call it, with the extended universe novels and comic books and everything. I was like, I can do that in my own head.
Yeah.
I can go there, and I don't need it to be something that's officially said by Lucasfilm or Disney or whatever. I can still pick the book up and read it.
Well, I think that was the one mistake with kind of Xing the EU, was just stopping it. Why not just let people continue to write these books and just slap the Legends tag on it, and just let them keep going. Right. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because the more you get, the more your product is out there, and then you're not going to tick everybody off, but you're still going to have these Legends things, and like you said, they don't have to say this is an alternate timeline, but in your own mind, you're going to pretend, you're going to create it whatever you want it to be, and just let the stories speak for themselves, and just kind of do it. And that was my only thing. Like, I didn't care personally one way or the other. I was like, oh, they want everything to connect. That's cool, but if they would have been like, we'll have everything connect, but we're also going to have these Legend stories continue, I would be like, that's cool, whatever. Like, take my money.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if they probably, well, they're not going to do that, right? But they could have. They could still almost do it if they wanted to, because it's the story's still there. There's still an ending that we're their stopping point. But I don't know. And it is neat that Story Group has got things kind of connected. In The Last Jedi, when they were bringing in like the compass, remember they had the whole Battlefront was kind of doing the whole Iden Versio storyline, and Luke is going out searching for artifacts and stuff, and then he finds a compass or whatever, and it ends up being in Luke's hut over on Ahch-To. It's like, okay, that's kind of little cool things that it's not overbearing to your mainstream fan, but people who have been reading along and following, you're like, oh, cool, I know what that is, and I know the story to that, and things. So it's kind of neat to see those little nuggets.
Yeah, that's just for us, and nobody else cares, and that's totally fine with that. Yes. So 3 years after Disney makes the purchase, The Force Awakens is about to come out. They've hired J.J. Abrams to write it. He's got Lawrence Kasdan to come in and help him polish up the script and finish that out. No one knows what's around. They announced some casting, a bunch of no names, a bunch of people we may have not heard of. Some familiar favorites are coming back in hopefully a big way. We don't know. And then in that, I think it was April, Star Wars Celebration hits Anaheim.
Yeah.
Where were you watching that?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I was either with my, I was with Mike, because we had, let me see, I'm just making sure here, our YouTube channel. So like before it was Rebel Watch, we had something called like Let's Look It Up, and we were kind of like just dinking around with like trailer reactions and reacting to sort of like nerdy news. It didn't matter if it was Marvel related, Star Wars, or whatever. We were just like, all right, cool. We just want to talk about everything. And the more we did that, we realized like we're really good at Star Wars and we really like Star Wars, and we just kind of hyper focused on that. But yeah, I remember being talking to him about all of that and talking about the conversation. We learned more. Remember, we learned those details about George sitting down with like Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, and her wanting her daughter to be involved, and Mark Hamill was out there kind of talking about that conversation, how cool that was to be invited back. And yeah, we didn't know any of those characters, and I was just sort of like, what is this going to be about? I mean, who are these people? And that was sort of the beginnings of my podcasting sort of YouTubing experience, actually. So yeah, that was really cool.
What did you make of that Chewie We're Home trailer?
Oh yeah, that was huge. I mean, I got chills during that. Do you remember the one that really got me though was, maybe it was the same trailer. No, I don't know that it was, where Mark Hamill is doing the voiceover. The Force is strong in my family.
Yeah.
Do you remember that with the speeder going by?
Oh yeah.
For some reason, that got me more than anything else. I don't know what it was. I was like almost in tears, just like, oh my God. And I remember like talking to my friends about it, and we reacted to it on Let's Look It Up, and we did a bunch of trailer reactions, leading into The Force Awakens and everything, and kind of following stuff from afar. And it just, I don't know. The Force Awakens is the whole reason I started podcasting legitimately. Like my first podcast was Rebel Watch, and it was all about Star Wars. And it started, actually, we were only posting on YouTube. I didn't understand anything about podcasting. I was just sort of like, okay, I just want to talk about this. You guys can go react to all these other trailers and do fun stuff. I'm just gonna. I knew that there was so much coming out about Star Wars, and they were building this new universe with interconnected comic books and all. Remember all the lead up novels?
Oh yeah,
that were like all. Yeah, so that like a journey too. I was like, okay, this is genius, and we have stuff to carry us into the film. I was like, this is good marketing. This is just awesome. So that's when I was like, we can do a full just Star Wars show. And I regret not doing that before. And really, I mean, because we had from 2000, as you said, 2012 to all of this sort of like, when's it coming? What's happening? What's going on? And they're trying to get everything worked out. I wish we would have been doing more speculation back then and really tracking down some of the rumors and stuff. But still, I'm just super stoked during that time. I just could not get over the trailers. I think that Luke trailer, him sort of, and still none of that was used. That audio was never used because Luke doesn't say a damn thing in in the Force Awakens. But it was still so cool because I'm like, who the heck is he speaking to? Is he speaking to Rey? Is he speaking to, because we knew at the time we had this new character, or is he talking to Leia? We just didn't know, and we didn't know how they were all going to work together. You had John Boyega, and it was a really, really exciting time. And I don't know, I wish I could have been there for some of those earlier celebrations where Kathleen Kennedy. I was watching some of the reactions to people, like they brought pizzas out to everybody standing in line who were like waiting overnight to like get into the big panels. Like they actually showed up, her and I think it was her and JJ or somebody. They showed up. Have you heard this story? Like people were like outside the convention center, like it's wrapping around, and they're bringing them like food and stuff, and just the hype was real.
That's amazing.
People were, yeah. So I don't know.
Did you get Aftermath the minute it came out on September? Was it September 15th, Force Friday, the 4th, I think, of September 2015?
Yes. Oh yeah. I remember that like that being a big deal, and I loved Aftermath. I thought it was really good, but I was like a little bit thrown because I'm like, wait a second, because I'm a timeline guy. I'm always trying to figure out where does this fit in, and I'm like, this is like right afterwards. This is basically the remnants of the Empire, and how does this lead me into The Force Awakens? But then I guess I was thinking, it's going to be a lot more closer. But then I had to think to myself, like, okay, these actors, are original, Luke, Han, Leia, so much older. It's 30 years later, all that kind of stuff. There's this big gap now, a huge gap that they've got to fill in, and we have to learn about Ben Solo and what happened, and we have to get there. So that was a great trilogy to kind of set up all that stuff and to talk about the Emperor and everything. And then shortly after that, the Battle of Jakku, the whole Battlefront stuff, right? That was all starting to be interwoven with some of that. When did Battlefront come out? The first. Let me see.
I think that was 2015 as well, right? A month, or do you mean 2015?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, because I remember like that being sort of important that we could read about these stories, and then we actually have like battles taking place that we get to kind of see and learn more about Jakku and this place that was going to be in the movie. Because it's like that was kind of cool that they introduced a whole new world, and to help us really understand its significance, and there's a lot of foundation laid there, I think.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, I think they did a great job. So now you got the book, you've read Aftermath, you're playing Battlefront, the movie is being released. When did you see that movie? Was it opening night? Did you wait a week? Did you wait for an old VHS copy to come on your front door?
Yeah, no, we went opening night. Had all my buddies there together. We're I think it was late. It was one of those things like we didn't need to go out at midnight because they started showing stuff a little bit earlier, but I think it was a midnight showing still. And we were up late, and I remember I think I got in trouble because I ended up, when was that? So I like something with work. Let me see here real quick. But anyways, I remember it was mind blowing. It was just absolutely mind blowing, and the whole cliffhanger thing. I know people had problems with like Luke at the end and that being an actual cliffhanger. But I remember walking out of there just like the speculation. We turned our phones on, we turned mics on, we started talking right away about it, and we're just super hyped. We wanted to like the question. I think what for Mike and I, one of the first things we did was who left Rey on Jakku, and it was one of our big discussions that took place right after it came out, and we could not get over some of the questions that were we dwelled on it clear up to The Last Jedi. I mean, The Last Jedi has us now dwelling on stuff clear up until The Rise of Skywalker. There's still unanswered questions, and I've never, even though we had like in the prequels, we knew where the story was going to go, and we understand that Anakin is turning to the dark side and everything, and so with this, I've never been in a position like this. I'd like to think back to when people were there in 1977, and you're trying to figure out what's happening next, and when Empire comes back, and like, is Vader lying to Luke about being his father, all that kind of stuff. I can imagine like my buddies and I back in that time podcasting, asking those questions, not podcasting, but just like talking about that whole thing, and I wonder what that felt like. And I think what's so cool now with the sequels is that I get to experience that. I know what that feels like. I get to I really appreciate when it's released because I've done all this thinking and waiting, and I've gone to Celebration, and I'm reading all the books. It's a cool time to be into Star Wars, and I don't know. I think what was always disappointing is when I was growing up, I would hear people talk about their time with the originals and what a cool experience that was to be kind of to be there in the beginning. I thought, man, I'm never going to get anything close to that. And really, truly, you'll never get that magical moment again. That's an amazing experience, and I love to hear people talk about it. But to me, the closest thing I could get is the sequels now, and just the hype, the build up between each film, and everything is has been fantastic for me. It's life changing.
I think the sequels is even more. It's a different experience from the originals in that we've had 6 other Star Wars films, a TV series, and now we have this new trilogy coming, which is the end of something. So just like the originals, we don't know what's next. But unlike the originals, when people went to go see Star Wars in '77, I don't think there was ever a well, we're getting 2 more. Now we're like, well, we're getting 2 more. What's going on? So it's a different experience, and it's I'm not lessening it or making it greater than. It's just it's a unique experience, and I think I'm with you on it, though. It's a fantastic one because the prequels, Anakin's turned to the dark side, but in this one, what's going to happen? Is Ben Solo going to get redeemed? Is Rey going to turn dark? Luke, is Luke going to come with his green lightsaber at some point? We don't know what's happening. So there's a lot of questions going on, and it's a great time to be a Star Wars fan, for sure.
It is. That's the cool part about it. It's our own. I don't know. It's a neat experience to have, and I love too that recently on Hyperspace we've gotten a few transmissions and like audio clips from people who were there, who were like 9 years old when it was coming out, and they're still now experiencing this. And so to talk to those people and have them compare, it's mind blowing. When you're someone like me and you're obsessed with Star Wars, like. I want to hear all those stories. I want to hear what that was like. Yes. I love to connect with people and hear their story, their experience, and that's why I love that you're doing this, James. Like it's like such a cool thing to capture people's experiences and to document sort of like what their journey has been like. It's huge.
Yeah, everyone, we've all had our lives impacted by Star Wars, and some, we all enjoy it, but we all experienced it differently, we all have different opinions. So I just want, what is Star Wars? What is it to each of us? It's all different. How many times did you see The Force Awakens in the theater?
Oh my gosh. I know it wasn't quite double digits, but it was up there, 8 or 9.
Wow.
I mean, cuz I was like the joke was that I was going to reach double digits, I believe. And what's crazy is, and people are going to hate me for this, but for some reason I loved that movie, but going in like Last Jedi, I watched even more. I went back and watched it over and over and over again. I was obsessed with The Last Jedi for some odd reason. Just because like all of the layers and the dialogue, the writing, just like trying to figure out everything that was being said and communicated there and sifting through it. But yeah, so 8 times I think for The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens, and then I know it was over 10 times for The Last Jedi. So
wow.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of. Those are the things I don't tell my family.
Yeah.
Because like, oh, you're wasting your money and all this kind of stuff. Like, am I? I don't know. I mean, it's valuable to me.
Exactly. So. The memories, you'll never get those back. Okay, so a year later, this little movie called Rogue One is coming out. The first time I ever caught a glimpse of Let's Look It Up. That's what it was. Let's look this up. Let's look it up.
Let's look it up.
It's been a while. You had those 3D glasses. So the first time I ever caught wind was during Star Wars Celebration Europe, and it was the sizzle reel for Rogue One. You did a reaction to that on that channel, and that reaction got quite a lot of views, actually. I think I wasn't the only one that saw that. So how excited were you for Rogue One, and did it live up to your expectations?
Yeah, and you're right. So that was when we weren't dinking around anymore. We were really trying to like keep up on Star Wars and figure out what was happening and everything. And so because it was a clip which sounds like it was cut audio, like that didn't make it into the final film. It was it sounded like people were dying. I remember like that little tiny it was a tiny promo clip like leading right into the panel. And I'm sitting there, and Mike's next to me, and we're kind of watching it, and he's like, yeah, just let me know when something happens. I'm like, all right, cool, And then I thought, are they opening with the trailer? Is this like a trailer? But it was just a quick little promo clip, and it sounded like it was a war zone. It sounded like real Star Wars, and I was just blown. I was like, are you kidding me? People are dying. I remember afterwards, we turned it off, and we walked away, and I was just like, dude, that sounded like people were dying, and I kept hearing that they were going for a much more serious, darker movie, and we understand the sacrifice that is made to get the Death Star plans from wherever they were, Scarif, which we learned, to over to the Rebel Alliance, and it was just It was huge. Yeah, that was a big turning point for us when we did that reaction, and I was watching Hamill himself, and we were following. Our buddy Tom came over, and we just took the whole day and covered it Friday, Saturday, and I think into Sunday a little bit. And I was blown away at how much, the little. I didn't understand that there were other little sub panels, and I would hear people and see people in the comments talking about, little like R2D2 Builders Club and things like that. I didn't really know what Celebration was, so. Then I was like, wait a second, this is not just like you go see 1, 2, 3 big panels. Like you can go see a crap ton of stuff. And after the live stream switches over back to their main stage, like there's all this other crap going on. And so that's when I didn't think I could get any more into Star Wars, but that was a big moment. And I was nervous about Rogue One. I was sort of like, I don't know, you're doing this standalone. When does it take place? Like, it's cool. I liked the idea about the story, the guy taking it from the opening crawl and what's the story behind this one line. And I was like, that's kind of cool. He pitches this to Kathleen and they run with it. But I was nervous. I was sort of like, are they? Because you start reading comments about people who've been following it more closely than I had about, is this too much too soon? Is this going to hurt Star Wars? Is this going to hurt the mainstream fan, like the viewership, or be confusing? What's going to happen? And I don't really think that really came into play until like Solo later on. But yeah, that was huge. That was a whole weekend event for us. We just sat down and kind of recorded all of that. And I remember going back and just rewatching that Celebration over and over again. And I remember I said to Mike, I was like, I don't care if it's back in Europe. I don't care where it's at. We're going. We are never not going to Star Wars Celebration. From this day forward, we're going. And so we made this pack, and like shortly after that, the ticket sales come back out, and you're like, okay, it's in Orlando. All right, we're going. So watching that from the Star Wars show, live stream was fantastic. So.
And did Rogue One live up to? Did you like it? Did it live up to your fear of it?
Yeah. So I, again, like I said, I was nervous, but I mean it ended up blowing my socks off. I mean, it was the best thing. I couldn't believe how good it was. I could not believe how good it was. Everything from Jedi, Saw Gerrera, all that stuff was super cool. I was blown away by how they made me care about K2 and Cassian, and I was just like, what? I really care about these characters, and I just met them. I literally just met these characters, and they're huge to me because it also has to do with the context of the whole thing. Is that like they're getting the Death Star plans? These are going to go to Obi-Wan, and the slight little reference between Mon Mothma, and Organa is it's like is your friend available? Yeah. And then there's the little nod to Leia. Is there someone who you could trust to get these plans there, and all this kind of stuff? I'm like, oh, this is so cool and interconnected. And I remember we were nervous because I like following it. We were nervous about some of the reshoots. Is it Gareth Edwards? Is that who was? Yep. Yeah. So a little bit nervous about some of the reshoots that had to take place, but everyone, Disney came out and said he was a super team player and was like, if that's what you guys want and this is what you need, then, and he went and did it, and it was fantastic. It ended up being, epic. So it definitely lived up to the hype and it's one of my favorites actually now. It's one of my favorite movies.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Okay, let's fast forward now to a few months later down the road.
Yep.
You and I'm sure we crossed paths, but we did not know it, are in this little part of America, United States of America, known as Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
And we are at Star Wars Celebration Orlando 2017.
Right.
What was the first thing you did when you got there? Did you wait in a 3-hour line to get in?
Yes, I did.
Yes,
absolutely did. And yes, I did. That was going out. It was stretching out near the highway.
Oh yeah.
And oh my gosh, man! I remember walking, and it was my buddy Mike, and we had our little buddy Andrew, and I'm like, and we kept asking. I was like, what is this line for? Because it just kept going. Yeah. And we thought we were there kind of early. We were there at like 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock or something like that. And I was like, ah, cool. We're here early. Hell no. I mean, this was like, it was stretching clear back around the corner and out by the freeway, and it just never ended. And then so once we got in, we didn't realize, we didn't know what the queuing system was like. We didn't know how to get into the opening ceremony type of thing, which so much stuff happened in that. Were you in that? Were you in the opening ceremony?
I was outside the hall in a lineup in 900-degree heat, getting sunburnt, watching it on. There's like a line. There's a group of people. I didn't know who half of them were, but it was with friends and my wife and a group. And we watched. We're all like on our phones, and some people would be like, "I got a signal," so I lost my signal. We'd all like huddle together in like a bus shelter and try to watch it. And I got into the convention center as John Williams hit the stage, so it was like. It was weird timing. So they're like, John Williams is here, and we all like got on our phones and we're trying to watch it. And by the time I actually got onto the show floor, it had ended. That's how long I was waiting forever to get in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that was. I remember people coming out with just. Yeah, I don't know. I was just like. Seeing, because I got into, I think we watched that from like the live stage, the live streaming stage. I was there, I was able to get in and watch it from there, and was like, this is unreal. That was the first thing we did, and was just blown away by it. I remember too, though, we were there so early, like we got inside, and this is all coming back now, and we were so confused about which line to get into for what. We didn't know where to queue up. You were getting your wristbands and stuff, and we went and were trying to grab wristbands. We actually almost could have got in there, but we just didn't know what we were doing. So we were walking down the line, and we saw this huge line to which they were queuing up to go into the opening ceremony, and we just didn't understand it. So we got wristbands for something else, and then we got in the general admission sort of like queue system where we're waiting for the big doors to open, and then we just went into the main floor, and then from there explored a little bit and said, okay, they're starting the stream at this time. Let's just watch and see what happens, because we didn't know what the heck we were doing. We were overwhelmed. So
it was overwhelmed. But, they could have spent a little bit of money on signage. Is the one thing that they could have. That was the whole convention. I thought it was lacking signage. Right. That was my first convention of any type, and that was my big takeaway was they need to order some Bristol board and a Sharpie and just start writing things down, because nothing. It was chaotic. Also, I wasn't in Chicago, as we mentioned earlier. You were. I thought what they did for getting into panels this time was way better. Instead of, I know people like the experience of camping out was whatever, but I just thought it was smart. Okay, lottery system, you're in, you're not. Like, get it over with before. So at least, because a lot of people got sick in Orlando from sleeping on those concrete floors.
Yes, they did. Yeah, I mean, so I like I said, I'm 50-50 on this, because I was glad that I had the experience. It was a crazy experience, but I remember standing in line at security, and Andrew and Mike were behind me, and I was dead. And I was looking ahead. I'm like, there's more than 3,000 people in front of me. I thought I could, obviously I couldn't estimate. I was more like 1,500, because we totally got into this is when we got into the Last Jedi. Because I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this wasn't worth it. We've literally just wasted 12 hours, standing outside, then sleeping on the concrete, to coming in here. Well, that was before we got into the sleeping on the concrete. But like, I'm looking at security, going, we're not going to make it. We're not going to get there's a guy standing there with a counter, letting everybody know how many people we have, and then they're going to tell people like, okay, you're not in the main the live action, you're in the streaming stage, all this kind of stuff. And it was a little. I can only imagine what it felt like for people behind us who didn't get in. And I was just like, dang, this would really suck to have to be standing outside and not get in to something like this. So, because you want to know, that was the big thing. I just didn't know, because I almost stepped out of line at security. I looked at it, I was like, no, dude, look, if people are just pushing ahead, it's just a crapshoot in here. So we're not going to make it. And I lost faith. I mean, I lost faith for a second there, and almost stepped that line. Thank God I didn't, because I got to high five Dave Filoni later on.
Awesome.
In the live action. In the live action. When the trailer hit. But yeah, I mean, that was cool. After we did the camp out too, just there in Orlando, like my meeting some members from the 501st, the Ohio Garrison for me, and then going to the R2D2 Builders Club and stuff, like I really started to get into, I'd always loved toys and books and stuff like that, but then I just started seeing all these other facets to the community that were amazing, other ways that you can get involved. So if you're not podcasting about it, you can go troop, you can be in the 501st, and they go to like Children's Hospital, and they do charity events, and it's just like, what? That exists? I mean, I knew that there were, I always wanted a legit sick costume, but I didn't quite understand that there was like an organization that you could join. So yeah, that was cool. It was just such a learning experience. It was just, I just wish I would have known more about it during the dark times. During the times where like I could have been going to those things and enjoying some of the earlier celebrations, because that would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, now they're getting too big. They're like, man, they're just getting so big.
Right. Yeah. I'm the fact that Anaheim sold out. The reason I wanted to go to this is because a lot of celebrations have been there, and I want to go see what that's like. But they're selling out so quick. And what's weird though is I wonder if they've got that capped. I mean, I know they have it capped because they're sold out, but I wonder where they've capped it, because when I went, and you can ask Andrew, when we were in Chicago, it was big, but it didn't feel any bigger. I mean, I don't really know what the attendance was like. I didn't really compare the two, but it still just kind of felt like a normal big convention. I felt like I could move around, and I could still talk with people, and set up my little podcasting shots over on the side of the main floor and things like that. So it didn't seem like it was so big that you couldn't do what you wanted to do, if that makes sense.
Totally, I understand what you're saying. So you're in that panel for the Last Jedi. Ryan Johnson's in there. Did you meet Ryan Johnson the night before?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So my buddy Andrew has a selfie with him, and he's just surrounded by people, and so where we were sleeping, actually, we were in these aisles. So the aisle we're sleeping in, we hear the doors open, and this commotion just takes place, right? And he's like 3 to 4 aisles over. Well, he moves, and he's standing directly in front of Mike, Andrew, and I in our lane, in our aisle. And then he's sort of like, it was the next lane. The guys that were in that lane were just like, come down this way, come through here. And so to our left, I mean, he walks right by us. And so, and some little girl was sleeping, her dad had to pick her up and move her away. It was crazy. And he didn't know, he's just being surrounded by this mob. And they're just, people were all over the place. It was the perfect time. If you ever wanted to hop over lines and get a little closer to the front of the stage, you could have, because people were just everywhere. It was chaos. And he's moving through there, and I got to grab his hand and say, you're the man, thanks so much. And he stayed there for hours. Yeah. He went over on the side and watched people do lightsaber battles and everything. I mean, I don't know how he was functional the next day. It was crazy. So,
well, what was it like being in that room with him the next day, watching that trailer for the first time, seeing that poster for the first time?
Yeah, I remember tears. I mean, like when the poster was one thing, and here's how I describe sort of when we got to watch the trailer. And I turned to my buddy Mike and Dave Filoni and a couple other guys. We're on the very, very, if you're looking at the stage, very far left side, where there's guys guarding you get your actors, and the whole cast was back in there, and you've got some producers and writers, and you can see the Star Wars bigwigs coming out through the side there once the lights had gone down, and they're just standing there. And Dave's got his big hat on. He's got this huge hat, and I'm like, he's literally standing less than 3 feet away from me, and I'm like, oh my! I'm like, Mike, and he's like, dude, he's like, I'm shaking. He's losing his mind, and the trailer hits, and I just remember like people were up on chairs. It was like we had just destroyed the Empire. We had just destroyed the second Death Star, and we're on Endor, and everyone's just cheering and hugging and crying, and you're turning around, people you don't even know, and you're just losing your absolute mind. And that's when we like stepped out into the aisle, and there's Dave Filoni, and he's high-fiving people, and everyone's just fired up, because I don't know if he had seen it or not, because like some of the cast and crew and different people, this was their first watch of the trailer, and some people wanted that experience. They wanted to be a fan because they're fans of Star Wars, and they wanted to stand out in the audience and sort of just focus in on the trailer and see what it was like. It was freaking amazing. It was crazy.
Well, you said you saw the movie more than Force Awakens.
More than 10.
Yeah. You've lost count of so many. But so what was it?
Yeah.
So let's just get ahead to that movie, because the movie comes out, and obviously there's the great fan divide. But that's you.
Yeah.
You went in and you're like, this is awesome. What do you know what it was about it that really drew you towards it?
Well, so for me, I remember going into it, and I was talking to my buddy Matt about what I needed from the movie. And, I wanted the questions answered about Rey's parentage. I was hoping to get some stuff on who left Rey on Jakku, but ultimately, it's Matt's weird. He like read the spoilers beforehand and kind of knew what was happening because he couldn't watch it opening night with us, and so he wanted to kind of know what was happening. So going into it, I was like, "Do not tell me any of the spoilers." He said, "Can I tell you one thing?" I was like, "No, you cannot." And he was like, "No, not a spoiler." He's like, "I'm just going to tell you that one thing will happen in this movie, and it's the one thing that will make it for you, and you will be satisfied. It will satisfy everything else, and you will go back and try to justify why this movie is amazing because one thing will happen." And I was like, "Really?" And he hadn't even seen it yet. And what it is, it ends up being it's the Force projection. It's Luke levitating. It's that shot back to him, and he knew that I kept saying leading into that movie, I was like, if there's one thing I need an epic Master Skywalker moment. Give me that moment where he's just a boss, because I was one of those people who felt like in The Force Awakens when the lightsaber, in Rey summoning the lightsaber, I'm like, I was like, this is a great spot for Luke to step in and just, take the saber, and he's there to save the day. And you're like, what? He came out of nowhere. That's what I was thinking was going to happen. And I was disappointed it didn't happen. So I was like, I need a moment now like that. And so I got that moment, and it was epic. I mean, even the Force projection, lightsaber battle, the whole thing. I just thought him showing up and talking to Leia, and that whole piece, the little wink to C-3PO going out there. Now, later on, I went back and looked at some of it, and I was just sort of like, okay, there's a couple issues with that whole thing. Like if he's out there running distraction, like maybe he should have told somebody that, hey, I'm going to distract a little bit here for you guys to get out of here. But then also you want the legend of Luke Skywalker to be told. And so you need witnesses to kind of see him go out here and do what he did and to keep them at bay. And so, and really, even when those kids at the end of the story are talking about Luke Skywalker coming out and facing down Kylo Ren, it's sort of the end of all of that isn't really known because they leave. They don't really get to see the, Kylo stab him in the chest or run him through or whatever. You don't get to see that whole interaction. You just heard from some Resistance members that Luke Skywalker showed up and was defending them against the First Order enough that he made a sacrifice to where they could leave. Now, Rey and Leia kind of know because they can sense that he had this peaceful exit, becoming one with the Force. So yeah, for me, I don't know, that was, I needed my Luke Skywalker moment, and I wish I would have gotten more moments. I wish it would have been more, but I needed one moment. Rian Johnson gave me one moment, and so I was like, okay, this is cool. This is pretty sick. And here's one of the things because in going back and watching it, it's like the whole Force connection thing. Kylo kind of thinks when he first sees Rey and they're connected, it's like he's not sure if it's a Force projection or if it's a connection. He doesn't know. He's like, "Are you really here? Can you see my surroundings?" And then he says something like, "The Force of this would kill you." You're not doing this, and so the Force of it would kill you. So who's doing that? So to me, like for Luke to Force project himself there, it took a master to do that. It took master power and skill to do something like that, and it so much so that some would say it killed a master. I like to believe that Luke just sort of said, he gets back up on the stone and says, "All right, well, I don't know. That whole bit is sort of like, I don't know that it killed him, but it's like it drains him and he just becomes one with the Force." I don't know. There's still some things I do struggle with a little bit in it, but it had that moment for me. And then the Praetorian Guard scene is fantastic too. I thought that was epic. So yeah, sort of the second half to that movie is really what I liked, I guess. So, and I know it's divisive and some people don't like it, and it's like, I'm just waiting for The Rise of Skywalker to really see if there's some connections there, if there's something that would make the lines, or if they use something that's said in The Last Jedi. I don't know how it's all going to work, and so I want to see this finished, and then I can really go back and say, all right, well, they did retcon something, or they did whatever. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it is the second part of a trilogy, so we'll find out in December what's going on, and I can't wait. How many times did you see Solo in the theater?
Solo, I did 3-4 times maybe. And I really enjoyed it, actually. I didn't not enjoy it. So my buddy Matt, it's actually one of his favorites, and my buddy Tom he really enjoyed it as well. I think Mike really liked it. It's just, I don't know. It was kind of, I remember driving to see it, and we had our Star Wars podcasting gear and our shirts on and everything, and we were driving up to like Cleveland to watch it up there. Early one day, we had taken work off, and we're somewhere at a restaurant, and people were talking about, where are you guys going? What do you guys do? And he was a Star Wars fan. He was just sort of like, he was a little confused. He was like, so is this like the next movie, or is this like back in like early on? He's like, I just don't, are they recasting this guy, or what's happening? He was a little confused. And for a guy who would claim that he's a Star Wars fan, I was like, oh man, I kind of understand why you're a little confused, but it's that was my, remember I said my worry with Rogue One was that there would be some confusion for folks who were trying to follow the main saga. And so, that was the first time I was like, oh wow, okay, there are people out here who is a little bit thrown by this and don't quite understand it, who were thinking, isn't this the next movie? People like my dad, who was really not into it, was sort of like, so this is the next one, right? So, we're going to get more about Luke and Rey. I'm like, no, they're not in this one. This is back in, before episode 4. And he's like, what was episode 4 again? So that's where I still love it. And I think it's cool for your deep and sweaty Star Wars fans. But it was a good movie. I thought it was an all around fun movie. It was something you'd watch on a Sunday and say, yeah, this is fun.
Yeah, I think the one issue I think with Solo is that it wasn't the event film that Star Wars typically is. It's not like we all have to go and see Solo and see what's up. It's like it felt more like, and I've said this before, a Disney Plus show movie. Something on that. Yeah. I felt like your books. This would have been a great book. Like that's how I felt. And I love Solo. I love that movie. It's one of my favorites. But it doesn't have that impact of the saga films going with it, or the Rogue One, because Rogue One was the very first of these standalones, so it didn't have that going for it either. And then the marketing, and then the backlash, and there's a lot going on with that. All right, before we wrap up, I just got to know, because I was not there. Just give me your feelings, your whole story about Star Wars Celebration Chicago, which I heard was actually the worst celebration of all time. I heard that there was nothing good that happened, and I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, and I mean, so okay, there were some grumblings. I mean, there were people who were just upset by whether it was the queuing system, and I kind of saw pros to that and cons. But
I was just joking around. I actually thought that was a great idea, though. To be like from
no, seriously, it actually, I mean, yeah, there are really good pros to that. So and it actually made things a little easier at times for us to get into panels we really wanted, that we knew it, so yeah, we didn't have to go like think, okay, is there a line down there, let's go check in. We just knew, hey, we're in, got so we to spend more time on the floor doing things that you wanted. So that was neat. The oh gosh, what was the big the Rise of Skywalker trailer, right? Didn't get into that panel, so I was a little bit sort of like, that kind of sucked. But I guess, was the poster leaked or something?
There was like mock poster. No one knows what it is still. Oh, I mean, by the time this goes up, maybe it'll have been answered. But no, I think that was like a Walmart box bin or whatever.
Okay, because people were hoping for like a big poster. I don't know, people felt a little underwhelmed, I think, by that panel, and that was some of the vibe I was getting. Although, like I think what they're going for is, you don't need anything else. Like when the title hits, The Rise of Skywalker, I'm like, okay, like every single person is walking around like, what does that mean? And you could walk past every little group of people that I walked past, because I was on the main floor there watching it from the live stream stage, and I just watched it by myself. Mike was up front with his girlfriend, and my buddy David was over in the actual panel with Lindsay. Our friend Lindsay Gadati from Clashing Sabers, and they're front row. I was like, actually, I'm watching it from the streaming stage, and I see them sitting like front row. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So, and they had it. They said the atmosphere in there was great. It was awesome. I think they were hoping for a poster afterwards and stuff like that. Something exclusive, because we got a lot of posters. We got stuff from Fallen Jedi. We've got stuff for The Mandalorian. We got some cool, posters and merchandise and pins and stuff like that. And they didn't really get any of that for The Rise of Skywalker. But I think they're just the timing of Celebration. He was still they're still working on a lot of that sort, that stuff and things. So just to get the title was huge, because remember we had the Last Jedi title beforehand of The Force Awakens and. Yeah. So we had that stuff to kind of go off of. We had no idea what the daggone title was going to be. So the title reveal in and of itself was fantastic. And then we set up shop, and I remember I got a chance to talk to Alex from Star Wars Explained. I saw him right afterwards and walked over, and he's standing with his wife Molly, and I just walked over to him. I was like, so, I got my Rebel Watch shirt on, and I'm talking. He sees me coming over, and I just shook his hand, introduced myself, and I was like, I mean, am I the first person to ask you what your thoughts are? He's like, close. He's like, you're close. Like, they kind of just ran away from wherever they were at, and they were over in a corner getting ready to go do something else. And it was cool just to talk to him and then talk to a couple other people about their initial reactions and just like who's doing the rising. Like what is the Skywalker who's rising, or is there a group of Skywalkers rising, or what's going on? So that was really neat. And then I thought the best part, like for me, the coolest thing to Celebration, and not just because I was in the panel, was the Mandalorian. Like the Mandalorian stuff, I was so inspired to see Favreau and Filoni kind of like their friendship, to learn about that and to learn about what's happening with that TV show, and that people are saying it feels like Star Wars, like it really is going to fit in well, and it won't feel super different, and it's this live action TV show, the streaming service, and so we got a sick poster for it. We even got some behind the scenes stuff that was at the time was exclusive in the panel, which was neat. Yeah. So they cell phones off, that kind of thing was really cool. And that made it feel like, all right, cool. I'm glad we stood outside in the freezing. It was actually snowing at one point in Chicago. But yeah, that was really cool. I mean, I had a good time. I'm one of those, I couldn't spend enough time down, and I went to the podcasting stage, met some podcasters, and that's something, when we go to Anaheim, I'd love to meet up with you guys and go down there and maybe just listen to some other podcasts and get to meet some other people and really, collaborate a little bit more. And if you guys get a chance to get on that stage, gosh dang it, I need Rebel Scum on the podcasting stage over there talking Star Wars. So let's make that
all
happen,
right,
James.
Lucasfilm, Reed Pop, you get us on there. We'll do it.
Right, yeah. Oh, man.
No, it's definitely a goal for all of us. We'll have to meet up in Anaheim. I think I've got some ideas I want to run by you, too, for Anaheim.
Okay.
It's just going to be a lot of fun. Okay. I can't wait. I can't wait for the heat in August of 2020. And only 5 more months until Skywalker rises. So... yeah. So look out, that is coming. All right, Ezra, thanks for joining me on the Outlander Club. Before we go, though, let everybody know where they can follow you, find you, listen to you, and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can Hyperspace Hangout is we talked about at the top of the show, Star Wars podcast, where you can send us emails. You can send those to hyperspacehangout@gmail.com. We will read your email on the show. If you send us an audio clip, we'll play it on the show. We got some cool stuff going up. We got some really neat collaborations. Hopefully we're going to have James on soon, maybe later this summer. We can have Rebel Scum on and do a lot more collaborations there. But yeah, you can find us on Apple, Google Play, Stitcher, the whole nine. We're on Spotify, wherever you can find a podcast, we are there. We just started our YouTube presence, so we're working on that. You can follow us on Twitter at HHL337. So we got the L337.
Nice.
You can find us there on Twitter. So
nice. All right, check out those the podcasts on the YouTube channel, guys. And Ezra, once again, thanks so much for joining me right here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, man.
Hey, scumbags. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up on our video. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Rebel Scum Podcast, for all the latest videos.